The cameras were rolling live. The man on stage told his son the one thing he'd never been able to say. And Simon Cowell froze completely, unable to speak, just silently crying. America's Got Talent. Season 18. A Tuesday evening in Los Angeles. The Pasadena Civic Auditorium packed with 3,000 people expecting the usual spectacle: singers, dancers, magicians, comedians. Entertainment. Escape. The comforting rhythm of televised talent competitions. A man walked onto the stage. Late 50s. Weathered face. Calloused hands. Jeans that had seen better days and a faded blue button-down shirt that looked like it had been his good shirt for the past decade. His name was Robert Mitchell, and he looked like someone who'd worked with his hands his entire life. He carried a guitar, old, scratched, the kind of instrument that had been played hard and loved harder. Terry Crews greeted him with his usual energy. "Welcome to America's Got Talent! Tell us about yourself." Robert cleared his throat, visibly nervous. "My name is Robert Mitchell. I'm from a small town in Montana. I'm a construction worker. And I'm here because—" He paused, his voice catching. "I'm here because I need to tell my son something I should have said 20 years ago." The judges leaned forward. This wasn't the typical contestant introduction. Simon Cowell, sitting in his usual position at the right end of the judges' table, adjusted his posture slightly. His arms were crossed, his expression skeptical but attentive. "Your son?" Howie Mandel asked. "Is he here?" Robert nodded toward the wings of the stage. A young man in his mid-20s stepped partially into view, tall, brown hair, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans. He looked confused, like he hadn't known this was going to happen. "That's my son, Daniel," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "He's the reason I'm here. He's the reason I learned to play guitar. And he's the reason I need to do this." Cameras were live when the man on stage said the thing he could never tell his son, and Simon Cowell completely froze, couldn't speak, and just silently cried. "What are you going to perform for us?" Simon asked, his tone measured, professional. Robert pulled a small piece of paper from his pocket, folded, worn, like it had been carried for years. He unfolded it carefully. "I wrote a song," Robert said. "It's called The Words I Couldn't Say. And before I play it, I need to tell you all why I wrote it." The audience went quiet. This was already different from every other audition. 22 years ago. Robert began, his voice breaking immediately. "My wife Sarah died. Cancer. She fought for 2 years. Daniel was only 4 years old when she passed. And I—" He stopped, wiping his eyes. "I didn't know how to be a father without her. I didn't know how to talk to my son about grief or loss or how much I missed her. So I just worked. I worked construction 12, 14 hours a day. I came home exhausted. I fed Daniel, got him to bed, and then I'd sit alone in the garage and nothing. I felt nothing because if I let myself feel, I thought I'd break completely." Simon's expression shifted. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something else. Attention. Recognition. Daniel grew up. Robert continued. "And I missed it. I missed Little League games because I was working. I missed school plays. I missed the moments when he needed his dad because I was too busy running from my own pain. By the time he was a teenager, we barely spoke. By the time he graduated high school, we were strangers living in the same house." The judges were completely still. Heidi Klum had her hand over her heart. Sofia Vergara was already wiping tears. 2 years ago. Robert said, his voice barely above a whisper now. Daniel moved out. He got his own apartment in Billings. And the day he left, he looked at me and said, "I wish I knew what I did wrong. I wish I knew why you never wanted to be around me." The audience gasped. That collective sound of 3,000 people feeling the same gut punch. And I realized. Robert's voice broke completely. I realized he thought it was his fault. He thought I worked all those hours, avoided all those conversations, missed all those moments because of something he did. Because he wasn't enough. When the truth was... He looked directly at Daniel, standing in the wings. The truth was, I loved you so much it terrified me. I was so afraid of losing you, like I lost your mother, that I pushed you away. And by the time I realized what I'd done, I didn't know how to fix it. Simon stopped the show. No one knew what was happening. Simon Cowell stood up. Abruptly. His chair scraped backward. The other judges looked at him in surprise. The audience murmured in confusion. Stop, Simon said, his voice rough. Hold on. Just hold on. The cameras kept rolling, but everyone in the theater went completely silent. Simon walked out from behind the judge's desk, something he almost never did during auditions. He walked to the front of the stage, looking up at Robert. Before you play that song, Simon said, his voice tight with emotion, I need to tell you something. Robert stood on the stage, guitar in one hand, the folded paper in the other, looking down at Simon with confusion and fear. I lost my father, Simon said, and his voice cracked on the word father. Not to death. To distance. To work. To all the things that seemed more important than talking to each other. And by the time I realized I wanted to know him, really know him, it was too late. He was gone. And I never got to tell him that I understood. That I forgave him for all the missed moments. That I wished we'd had more time. The judges were crying now. All of them. Howie had his head in his hands. Heidi was openly sobbing. Sophia was clutching a tissue. Simon looked past Robert to Daniel, standing in the wings. Your father is standing on this stage, in front of 3,000 people and millions watching at home, about to sing you a song because he doesn't know how else to tell you he's sorry. That takes more courage than you can possibly imagine. He turned back to Robert. Play your song. And Daniel, he gestured to the young man in the wings, come out here. Stand on this stage with your father. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this performance is still ahead. Daniel hesitated. You could see the conflict on his face. 22 years of feeling abandoned, of wondering what he'd done wrong, of building walls to protect himself. But something in Simon's words, or maybe the sight of his father standing there holding that worn piece of paper, made him move. He walked onto the stage slowly. Robert watched him approach, tears streaming down his weathered face. They stood facing each other. Father and son. 2 decades of silence between them. I'm sorry, Robert whispered, barely audible even with the microphones. Danny, I'm so sorry. Daniel's jaw clenched. He nodded once, not trusting himself to speak. Robert sat down on the small stool that had been placed on stage. He positioned his guitar, his hands shaking. He looked at the worn piece of paper one more time. The lyrics he'd spent 2 years writing, rewriting, trying to find the words that could bridge 20 years of distance. Then he began to play. The guitar was simple. Basic chords. Nothing fancy. The kind of music a man teaches himself late at night in his garage when he's finally ready to feel something again. And then he sang. His voice was rough, untrained, the voice of someone who never sung publicly before. But it was honest. Raw. Every word carrying the weight of regret and love that had been locked away for 2 decades. I built these walls to keep the pain away. But I locked you out and didn't know that every hour I worked, every night I stayed away, was one more chance I'd never know. These are the words I couldn't say when you needed me to stay. I loved you more than you could see, but I was too afraid to let you close to me. Daniel stood 5 feet away from his father, arms crossed, jaw tight, trying desperately to maintain the walls he'd spent years building. But his eyes were glistening. His chin was trembling. I see you now, the man you've become. And I see all the moments that I missed. Your first heartbreak, your last game won. All the times you needed me to just exist. These are the words I couldn't say. I'm sorry I pushed you away. You were never the problem, It was always me. Running from pain, too blind to see. Simon Cowell sat back down at the judge's table, but he wasn't judging. He was just watching. Tears streaming down his face. One hand covering his mouth. The legendary music mogul who'd spent 3 decades maintaining perfect professional composure was crying openly on live television. The audience was silent except for the sound of 3,000 people crying together. Tissues appeared in hands throughout the theater. Strangers held hands. Parents held their children closer. If I could go back, I'd choose differently. I'd choose you over the fear. I'd choose to show up, to be present, to see that the pain of loving was worth every tear. Robert's voice broke on the last verse. He could barely get the words out through his tears. But he kept playing. Kept singing. Because this was the only way he knew how to say what needed to be said. These are the words I couldn't say. But I'm saying them now, today. I love you, son, I always did. I'm sorry I taught you to hide instead of live. These are the words I should have said. Every single day. The final chord hung in the air. Robert lowered his guitar, looking up at his son through tears. Daniel stood completely still for 3 heartbeats. 4. 5. Then he broke. He crossed the distance between them in 2 steps and collapsed into his father's arms. Robert dropped his guitar. It clattered against the stage floor. And wrapped his arms around his son, holding him the way he should have been holding him for 22 years. They sobbed into each other's shoulders while 3,000 people stood and applauded and cried and witnessed forgiveness happening in real time. Backstage, producers were begging him to continue, but he didn't. Simon walked back onto the stage. The other judges followed, Howie, Heidi, Sophia, all of them approaching this moment with the reverence it deserved. Simon stood beside Robert and Daniel, who were still holding each other. He waited until they pulled apart slightly, both of them wiping their faces, both of them looking exhausted and lighter at the same time. Robert, Simon said quietly, that wasn't a performance. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen on this stage. Robert shook his head. I'm not brave. I'm just 20 years too late. No, Simon said firmly. You're here now. That matters. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. I'm going to give you something. The number for a therapist who specializes in family reconciliation. Someone who can help you and Daniel navigate what comes next. Because this moment, this beautiful, painful, honest moment, is just the beginning. The real work starts now. He handed the card to Robert, who took it with shaking hands. And one more thing, Simon said. He turned to the other judges. A silent conversation happened between them, glances, nods, understanding. Simon turned back to Robert and Daniel. We all agree. This isn't about talent. This is about something bigger. He walked to the golden buzzer. His hand hovered over it for just a moment. This is about showing up when it matters most. He slammed his hand down. But what happened next, no one in the theater, or watching at home, could ever forget. Golden confetti exploded across the stage. The audience erupted. Not in excited screams, but in that deep, cathartic applause that comes from witnessing something sacred. Everyone stood. People were hugging strangers. Parents were holding their children. Grown men were crying into their wives' shoulders. Robert and Daniel stood in the shower of golden confetti, holding each other, and for the first time in 22 years, they looked like father and son again. Simon stood at the edge of the stage, watching them, his hands still on the golden buzzer. Tears streamed down his face. He didn't wipe them away. He didn't try to hide them. After the confetti settled, after the applause finally died down, Terry Crews approached with microphones. But Simon held up a hand. Let them have this moment, he said quietly. Some things don't need commentary. Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten. Robert and Daniel left the stage together, Robert's arm around his son's shoulders. The small folded piece of paper. The lyrics to The words I couldn't say stayed on the stage floor where it had fallen when Robert dropped his guitar to hug his son. A stagehand started to pick it up, but Simon stopped him. "Leave it," Simon said. "Frame it. Put it somewhere in this theater. As a reminder." "A reminder of what?" the stagehand asked. "That it's never too late," Simon said. "And that sometimes the most important performance isn't about talent. It's about truth." 6 months later, Robert and Daniel appeared on the AGT finale together. They'd been going to therapy every week. Learning to talk. Learning to be father and son. "How are things?" Simon asked them backstage. "We have dinner every Sunday," Daniel said, his hand on his father's shoulder. "And Dad calls me every night. Just to talk." Robert smiled through tears. "I have 22 years to make up for. I'm not wasting another day." Simon hugged them both. Something he rarely does with contestants. "You taught me something," he said quietly. "You reminded me to call my own son more often." The small folded piece of paper now hangs in a frame in the AGT production office. Above it, a plaque reads, "It's never too late to say the words." Robert's song never made it to iTunes. He never became famous. But he got something better. He got his son back. Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten.